As the red Protoss player, it is Grubby. And spawning in the bottom left position as the blue Protoss player from Team Evil Geniuses, it is Oz. And Grubby needs a quick pause. Oz as well. And let me just make sure that this is working okay. But yeah, this is going to be the first game of a best of 3. And this best of 3 does determine, again, who moves on into group stage, otherwise known as stage number 2. And today, I think we might be bringing in and out some guys from Root, of course, since you guys know I'm at the Root house. And we may see some commentary come in here from some players, such as Minigun. And yeah, so PvP, Newkirk Precinct. As far as build options on this map go, pretty much, I like to say PvP can almost do any build on any map, really. Except maybe Whirlwind. Blink, not really as strong. And let's just see what these guys are going to do. Gateways starting up for Grubby, so both players, neither of them going to do anything ridiculous. We saw some really interesting PvP yesterday, particularly with Oz. Oz versus Ash, I think, will be a series to remember, probably forever. The Nexus first build that he managed to pull off. I'm interested if he'll do anything quite as crazy versus Grubby. A much more solid player. Grubby didn't really have any difficulty getting through his Chinese opponents in a bracket coming up here. So you do have Grubby already moving out towards the top right now. Of course, there's only 2 spawn locations on this map, so his only goal could be to proxy something here. And given the positioning of it, it's not really close enough. It's actually farther away from his opponent than his main base is, so it's not going to be a Stargate. I wouldn't be surprised if we eventually saw a proxy Twilight Council, maybe Dark Templar, even. The only other option with the probe just kind of parked here is maybe some sort of weird gateway play, but it does look like he wants to proxy some tech. We have both assimilators being fully saturated by Grubby, so Dark Templar play seems very likely. Oz, on the other hand, keeping his second pylon close to home. His core is also on the way. And neither player scouting each other out does mean that there is a significant threat of this working pretty well for Grubby. We do have a second gateway being added on for Oz, so he could be doing something along the lines of a 3-stalker poke. We saw some relatively interesting builds, not really from Oz's side yesterday, that involved some other strategies, but there is the Twilight Council. I have no doubt we'll see a Dark Shrine, so Grubby is going for a very fast Dark Templar play. And Stalker coming out now, so we'll be able to scout this. And the thing is, not having it in the main base, of course, this is one of those maps where it's very easy to scout out your opponent with a Mothership Core. It's just a straight distance across the air to the opposing base as far as finding them and getting that intel goes. So that's one of the reasons why Grubby wants to proxy it so far away. Not in any area that Oz would ever check. So Oz now adding on, he did open up with a sentry. He's going into double stalker. So this could be a bit of a defensive play, can look to expand behind this, but with the chrono boost being put so hard onto the warp gate, we could potentially see a third gateway get added on and see Oz go for some straight head aggression. The lack of tech, though, is going to make things difficult. No Stargate means no oracles for Revelation, and of course, no robotics facility means no observers, no detection of any kind will be here for Oz. His only defense right now is the sentry. He can use the sentry to force field out the Dark Templar, try to buy himself a little bit of breathing room so that he can get himself into a position where he can get detection. We actually see him now getting 2 additional sentries. Once Oz hits 4 sentries, he can actually permanently force field his ramp. So he's not going to be in the worst position ever as long as he can react to the Dark Templar running up his ramp in time. If he does not force field out the Dark Templar, he's pretty much just gonna lose this game without having any detection. There's no way he can kill this off. Now we have a robotics facility starting up for Grubby. He'll be adding on an additional gateway himself, and the Mothership Core really for Oz coming in it's not really going to see anything. He can try to poke up here behind the mineral line. The route that it was set on does look like he wants to try to get a bit of information. Now the Dark Shrine is complete. Grubby has the proxy pylon in position, and there's the first Dark Templar now starting to warp in here. 2 Dark Templar will be brought in. Of course, one can tag the natural, but Oz, with his units parked like this, should be able to block anything from getting up the ramp. Now, the 2 DTs, if you can catch them in the right spot, might be able to pick off one of the sentries. I do not think he can actually run in here. At absolute worst, he'll only be able to get the Nexus, but yeah, that's going to be pretty much it here. So these 2 Dark Templars shouldn't have much trouble getting that. The Mothership Core recalls for Grubby, excuse me, for Oz as he gets shoved out. But essentially here, he can force field this Dark Templar away forever, basically. And we now have a double Stargate follow-up for Oz. So he's actually doing a little bit, it's a little bit like that style that we saw from him yesterday. Of course, this isn't coming out of the Nexus first build that he did on Whirlwind, but there's still a possibility that we could see this super heavy Stargate play. We have a Warp Prism coming in for Grubby, and it looks like he wants to just straight up bypass this. But now that Oz has an Observer, can't really do anything. And I think trying to get the 1 Dark Templar up the ramp was asking for a bit much. Maybe if Grubby kept both of them on the Nexus, he would have been able to kill the expansion. But what's going to be very interesting to see here is what exactly Oz will do with these Stargates. We'll likely see him open up heavy with Phoenix like he did versus Ash on Whirlwind. But he will have the option, of course, for the later transition into the Void Rays. And if Grubby goes for any kind of Colossus-based play, he'll, of course, have the option to go for a Tempest in the later stages. So Warp Prism making its way across the field. 2 Stalkers, a Zealot, and a Dark Templar in here for Grubby. Now, Grubby does have an Observer on the way to his opponent's base. He doesn't have one there. He can't immediately pick off the Observer of Oz. But as far as Oz's defenses, how much is really here? Not a terrible amount. He could get couple of probe kills before anything serious happens. The Warp Prism will immediately get tagged by these Phoenix, and Grubby's just going to town on this probe line. And at the same time, he runs a DT into the natural, so the Observer, the only single Observer here for Oz, is being forced to run around between both bases. And a lot of probes are actually dying here for the Evil Genius. Protoss player Grubby got 16 so far. Proton Overcharge is activated, but is it in time? I'm not so sure. He's actually doing a serious amount of damage. Grubby now securing his own expansion at the same time. Will eradicate the most of the main base mineral line, of course, getting some at the natural as well. And it's a really nice play by Grubby. What will his follow-up be? A Templar Archives. He's getting a cannon for defense. Currently sitting pretty at only 2 gateways, so he doesn't have a crazy amount of production available to him. We don't see anything like Immortals coming out. And this is, the Templar Archives is a very interesting decision, of course. He can kind of prevent later on these Phoenix from doing much damage to him by having the Archons out. They are massive. They can't get lifted. He will lose his Mothership Core, though. Nice catch there for Oz. And right now, Oz just needs to make the most of these Phoenix. He has the mobility edge, but Grubby, we're likely going to see him put out additional Stalkers. We'll likely see him go for the Archons just because they can't be lifted. And if he wants to go for a follow-up attack to abuse Oz's crippled economy, then he's going to be in a very good position to do so. So the Phoenix just keep coming out. We have a Robotics Bay now on the way for Oz. The Phoenix for Oz flying around the map. Did spot that proxied area that was here in the beginning of the game. Observer heading over for Grubby. And Oz, I believe he does not actually know about the proxy pylon, so Grubby still has an option to go for some harass counterattacks if Oz tries to make any kind of follow-up push. But for now, it's just the Phoenix play. And also with the High Templars, he can immediately feedback any Phoenix that get too close to his base. So Grubby, oh, he's coming in here. He's going to pick up a probe. 2 Phoenix immediately. Actually, only one gets feedbacked. He will pick up both High Templar, and that's actually a really nice catch for Oz. Grubby, as soon as he feedbacks, he needs to turn them into an Archon to prevent them from getting lifted up. But now with 1 cannon in each mineral line, he has a somewhat reasonable amount of defense against this. We saw another unit try to run in here and get some more probe kills in the natural. Nothing doing there. +1 attack will be done for Grubby relatively soon. He's now moving up to 6 gateways. So he'll have a pretty moderate amount of production. Now we do have a Colossus on the way for Oz. He's still going for the standard tech setup here. He doesn't have too many actual army units, and this is where the force fields become super important. Phoenix running into the main base, trying to get a few more probe kills, and he's trying to slowly even this out. Grubby still did a lot more damage to him. He did the damage earlier, so it compounds itself, but we actually see a supply lead for Oz as he's just been pumping out these units. Grubby going for the high tech-based play. His production is going to explode in just a little bit, but he doesn't really have a crazy amount of stuff to make use of. Of course, these Phoenix do eat up a large portion of the supply that we do see for Oz, and not quite as strong in a standing fight, especially if we do see Archons made at some point. And it's important to note that Grubby isn't going for Robotics Bay himself. He wants to play off what seems to be an Immortal Gateway unit-based composition, perhaps mixing in the Archon. I don't think the High Templar will be terribly useful in the later stages of the fight. He doesn't even have Psionic Storm. So I feel like the primary purpose these will serve is to either feedback something that tries to lift up the Immortal, or just go into an Archon and break the force field so they can get close enough to the Colossus to kill it off, because Oz's army, very small, but he has the tech that he needs to move himself further and further into this game. more district observers coming out. And here we see Grubby moving up to 8 gateways. This is a little bit more what his tech setup does suggest would be a bit stronger, going for heavy mineral investments, perhaps into Zealots, and then heavy gas investment into High Templar. Does get a couple feedbacks off on these Phoenix, which is always nice. Throwing down even more and almost manages to kill them off. Of course, these Phoenix are so fast. It is very difficult to actually kill them, even after those feedbacks. But we do have Extended Thermal Lance now complete for Oz. Grubby, he's going to get matched here. Grubby is going for the +2 attack. So as far as that goes, he does have a slight advantage here. There's only +1 on the field for Oz. In fact, I don't even think Oz is researching any of his Twilight Council upgrades. So he does have the Twilight Council. He's going into the High Templar play himself with his Templar Archives, but no +2 attack. And in these big engagements, that can really make the difference, of course. Having the area of effect on the field for Oz will give him a better spread, so the lack of the additional attack upgrade won't matter as much. And now we see Oz beginning to move out onto the field. He has 3 Colossi. As far as the defense goes, this actually may be a tricky hold for Grubby because Oz can just lift up the Immortals while he moves in the rest of his forces, and we do not see any more High Templar being used for anything like feedbacks. He does have an Archon, and this is going to be a really difficult attack to stop from Oz. He has so much here, and he's just been cranking out these units. Despite the damage that he took earlier on in this game, it doesn't seem to have really done terribly much. Now Grubby already pulling into his natural. I think he's ready to forfeit the 3rd base if this push does come from Oz. Although Oz could just wait for the 3rd Nexus to complete and basically force him to keep that as a sunk cost. And he's actually going to build a cannon at the 3rd base. Grubby, here comes Oz. He has the Colossi getting in a ton of damage. The Phoenix immediately come in and lift up these Immortals. The Zealots are trying to advance forward for Grubby with the charge, but the Archons just clean those up way too easily. GG, and Oz is going to take game number 1.